my brand, I would say, is that like I ask a lot of questions in my books and I like to write fiction that makes people think. So like the idea has to grow roots, it has to grow legs, it has to be something that can scaffold an entire book. I will not start writing a book until I've got like a 20K outline pretty much. I am an extreme plotter.
Hello and welcome to Literary Prospects. I'm Kelly Vick, I'm the host of the program, and that was Joan F. Smith. Joan is an author, dance instructor, and former Associate Dean of Creative Writing. She lives with her family in Massachusetts, where she was the former writer-in-residence at the Milton Public Library. Joan received her MFA in Creative Writing from Emerson College, and she writes both young adult and adult fiction. Your Soulmail is Attached, her debut adult novel, is out now. And on today's episode, we are discussing how to make wildly speculative elements feel grounded, the difference between an idea and a full book concept, extreme plotting, and much more. So let's get started. Joan F. Smith, thank you so much for joining today to discuss your delightful and intriguing adult debut, Your Soulmail is Attached. Author Marissa Stapley says, addictive, clever, and deeply romantic. Your Soulmail is Attached made me gasp, laugh, and wonder what I'd do if an email revealed the name of my soulmate. Joan F. Smith writes with dazzling insight about love, choice, and the courage it takes to follow the heart. Author Colleen Oakley says, this utterly original and captivating interrogation of love, fate, and free will kept me up way past my bedtime. Author Jilly Gagnon says, wildly innovative and profoundly human, Your Soulmail is Attached will stay with you long after you finish. A thoughtful, beautiful meditation on love and what it truly means to be free. And one more, author Natalie Sue says, exactly what I love in a read, a smart, world-altering concept, intimately executed and grounded with true-to-life characters worth rooting for. A speculative tale with a media satire twist, topped with a swoony summer romance. The perfect blend. So, with that, welcome, Joan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. So can you tell us about Your Soulmail is Attached? How do you describe this book?
Of course. So the main premise, the main pitch is everyone on Earth receives the identity of their soulmate in their email. And our protagonist, Olivia Adler, is a background worker in a newsroom, and she becomes the face of Soulmail sort of accidentally. And basically, she has a front row seat given the newsroom atmosphere to watch this worldwide phenomenon unfold.
I'm curious about what started this story for you. How did you come up with this incredible premise?
Yeah, so I came up with this, I think it was the summer of 2022. And I had recently read The Measure, and I loved that book so much, of course. And I was deep in the middle of the morning show as well. And coincidentally, those two books, those two media became our pitch, our comp title pitches when we went on sub. But regardless, I kept thinking about, I love when the world has a shift in some way, even if it's not a great shift. I think it's really interesting to see how something like a global pandemic or something, some big tsunami, some big event that really impacts the rest of the world. I think examining the fallout of those things is really, really interesting. And just in the history of like all of humanity, these big things happen. This specific big thing hasn't happened, but especially with the way that AI has developed, I mean, who knows what our future could hold. And I don't say that in a super positive AI way, but yeah. So yeah, that idea just kind of bubbled up. What if everybody could find out? And when I say soulmate, I mean your strongest bond. I don't necessarily mean it has to be a romantic soulmate. And getting confirmation of that was a really interesting idea for me. So I ran with it.
You have said that when you started working on this, you thought absolutely you would open the soul mail. And
Hmm,
that kind of
hmm, hmm.
changed for you as you were working through this project, right? Can you?
Oh man, yes. So this occurs in 80% of people say they'd open it. And that every time I run a poll on my social media, every time I'm having dinner with, 10 people,
Mhm.
it's 8 out of 10, almost every time say, oh, of
How
course I'd open
strange.
it. Yeah, I know. And even at my book launch event, there were around 50 or 60 people there, which was awesome. And I had everybody do a show of hands. And sure enough, about 3/4 of the room. Yeah. So I think that there's something that is like confirmatory about a soulmate for some people. I think that there are some people that, like, if given the opportunity to know something for sure, we have so little control in this world
Mm.
that I think some people would take that, right?
Yeah.
And at the beginning, I was like, oh, I would of course do, like, of course. And then after I wrote the book, I kind of reevaluated that and I was like, I don't know. I feel like I like my life right now. Like, what if it blew up? Right. So
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest fear for me, honestly, would be that, like, my soulmate would be one. I have two kids, and like, what if it was one but not the other?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like where I'm at. Maybe that'll change someday. Hopefully not. Knock on wood.
Knock
But
on wood.
yeah.
There is there's obviously this like hugely speculative twist, right? In this novel, but yet it feels so grounded in reality as we know it. How did you manage to do that? From a craft point of view, take this wildly speculative element and make it feel completely plausible and relatable.
Great question. It sort of has two answers. One was the amount of research and background development I did that is not in the book is
Mm.
pretty extensive. Like, I thought a lot about government systems. I did a lot of international research because, I mean, I live in Massachusetts and I know what this state area is like, but even like the United States is so broad and so opinionated in different ways that it would be different in every state. But like, different countries have different definitions of relationships and marriages and the age of minority or majority. So I did a lot of different research on government systems, on social systems. I did a lot. I have these like psychology and philosophy textbooks. So I always dive into those no matter what book I'm writing. I did a lot of that. And most of that did not make it in. There are a few like small passages that are used as transitions in the book where
Mm.
that is present. But that was sort of the way I crafted that in. And then the second part of this is there are so many stories that I'm a pretty ruthless cutter for my work. If I write a page, I'm cutting half of it. And there on the cutting room floor are multiple chapters of like different characters and exploring them a little bit more, and stories that never made it in the book. So even just being informed of that background information, I think probably helps inform the narrative.
It really does because I kept finding myself noticing as I was reading, there are all of these questions that come up in this kind of scenario, right? Like, what is a soulmate? Is it only romantic? Does your soulmate have to be alive? What if people don't have email? It's an
Mm-hmm.
international
Mm-hmm.
phenomenon, like you were saying. So
Yeah.
I kept like picturing you writing this and thinking about all of the brainstorming and research that you would
Mm-hmm.
have to do to really make this feel
Yeah,
who it is.
and that ultimately, I mean, when I came up with the idea, my writing partners and I, we call it the download, where you get like the shape of the
Mm.
story in your brain and you just know what the shape is going to look like. But I do think that adding that research in eventually did change the shape of the story a little bit.
Mm.
And then like there is sort of this, so the email thing was huge. I was like, wait a second, only half of the world have emails. Like, first of all, the privilege of our lives is insane.
Right.
And then there is a huge sector of the world that does have a cell phone, but not an email address. And so that looped in. And then there's a whole contingency of millions of people who don't have access to anything. So I had to account for those people too in the world building of that. And then on top of that, probably midway through, the concept of consent came up. I don't know if you picked up on that, but in this world, your soulmate is, you are also the soulmate of the person in your inbox. So if I want to know my soulmate, but like my soulmate doesn't want to know their soulmate, there is this like kind of weird consent issue that came up, and that was really interesting to explore.
Another thing are your characters, right? We heard in the blurbs that one of those wonderful grounding aspects are your beautifully drawn, true to life characters. How do your characters tend to come to you? Are you pulling from people that you meet in your everyday life? Do you kind of sit and meditate on it? Do they just pop in your brain one day? What does that look like for you?
I feel like this is an improv exercise because I'm going to say yes and.
Okay, great.
I often do pull from real life, but what that means for me is sometimes I will pull from real life and I will completely give that person the opposite of something. So the character Wells, who when the book opens is her fiance, there is a quality of my husband's that he has in spades that I gave Wells the complete opposite of. And that was a good way for me to draw it because I know my husband so well, right? That thinking about his opposite was good for me to implement. Olivia, I gave knee pain because I have chronic knee pain. So that was just like a tiny quality that I felt comfortable giving her of my own and thinking about how it impacts my daily life. I wound up actually cutting probably half of the times that she thinks about it. But yeah, so I take everything from little physical attributes, life experiences, personal qualities of people I do know in real life, and I definitely do infuse them. And again, sometimes I twist it.
I love that idea of twisting it, taking something that you know so well in another person and totally flipping it on its head and doing the opposite. That's really cool.
Thanks.
What is your process like generally? How do you go from your idea spark to finished draft? Does that look different with every book? What is it?
Oh man, yes. Hot Mess Express. I am a busy mom. I am a dance teacher as well. I've got a podcast going with my writing partners now. Oh, and constantly I live in my notes app. I think I'm like close to 400 notes now, which is mortifying. And if I get an idea, I do have one note that's pinned to the top that is like my book ideas. And I just keep kind of pinging stuff in as it comes up. When I sit down to write one specific book, I do not write linearly, which drives people up a wall. I am an extreme plotter. So I will not start writing a book until I've got like a 20K outline pretty much. I give myself major permission to deviate from those because sometimes I get a better idea and sometimes in revision, something is going to come up anyway. So I change it. But I write what I want to write while I'm writing the book, which is not necessarily the easiest way to draft, I think. I also break multiple writing advice rules, including I do not write every day. I do not try to come up with a word count goal. I do not, a lot of people advise that you write a book and then like you write a book and then you don't revise it until later. Yeah. I don't do that. I always read what I wrote the day before, no matter what, and tweak it. Because to me, it's like a living, breathing document. And if I just like ignore what I did a week ago, I'm probably going to forget it because I'm all over the place all the time. I'm running around town. I'm dictating in my phone. I'm driving a carpool. I'm dictating in my phone. I am like constantly thinking and mind spinning about my projects while they're live.
You have talked about, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about the podcast later, but you guys have mentioned the shower idea. I think like talking about coming up with things in the shower.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great because that happens to me. I feel like it happens to so many people that I've talked to on the podcast Why do you think it is that things seem to come to you in the shower?
Well, the shower, I mean, now we've got waterproof radios and stuff, right? But for the most part, I think the shower is kind of a sacred space for not watching TV, not scrolling on your phone. Yeah, you can't scroll, right? Like, and if you are, you probably shouldn't. So you're really just focused on getting yourself clean, maybe thinking through your day, whatever it might be. It's one of the few times I think that our brains are actually emptied of distraction. And so that is really, and like that, and to me, sometimes while I'm driving, those are the times where I'm not like trying to multitask and do 20 things at once. And those are where the ideas all of a sudden pop in your head. It's such evidence that we are way too chronically online and chronically focused on so much at once. But yeah, like I actually Friday night I leapt out of the shower to write a scene for my next book because I was like, oh my gosh, lightning strike. So yeah, the shower is really, I think if you're stuck, take a shower.
Do you keep like a notepad outside of your shower? Have you gotten to that kind of?
I used to, and then my notebook stack is taking over the world. So now most of my stuff is in my notes, but I do buy a different moleskin notebook for each book that I'm working on. So, because I do write longhand quite a bit as well.
Soulmail is your adult debut. You've written YA prior to this. You say you never went into your career with the expectation of writing only YA or only adult. So you do not consider this a pivot.
No.
Can you talk about your approach? Because I love it.
Yeah, it was an uninformed approach, to be totally blunt. Like looking back, such a baby when I think about like how I jumped into this career. I am incredibly fortunate that my first book was the first book that I ever finished writing. So that is not the case for, I don't know what the percentage is, so don't fact check me, but for the bulk of debut novelists, your first book is not going to be your debut novel. So that's the book that I got an agent with. That's the book that I got my first book deal with. And that was the book that I had to write at the time. And I had been reading, like, there was so much John Green and Hunger Games and all these things that were in that audience. So I think that that's kind of where my voice was at the time. And as publishing evolved, as I evolved, I still read a lot of YA. My writing partners are still YA authors, but my ideas are definitely more adult fiction at this point. And, maybe that won't always be the case, but yeah, I just like didn't come in with this like blueprint of a career and intention. My brand, I would say, is that like I ask a lot of questions in my books and I like to write fiction that makes people think. And I think that that is an element that you could trace no matter what audience I'm writing for.
Did you receive any kind of pushback coming out with an adult novel after a couple of successful YA novels?
So funny enough, I was fortunate that these books, this was a 2-book deal and it was an auction situation. So I was meeting with a couple different editors, and all 3 of them, I think in the calls, asked, why I was pivoting. And that was just such a funny thing for me to go back to my writing friends and report that like, oh, like this is such a fun, exciting rush of a busy week. And I was so taken aback that my agent was right because she prepped me. She was like, they're all going to ask. And I was like, I don't know. Do you think so? But they all did.
You got your MFA at Emerson, where you primarily studied fiction, but you have said that the screenwriting course that you took there was the thing that actually informed the writing of your books the most. Can you
Absolutely. Yes. And actually, I just made a different mental connection about that, which was my MFA was a full-time 3-year program, and everything was fall and spring semesters as was standard. And the screenwriting course was one that I took over the summer to try to shave off more time so I could fill it in on the different semesters for work purposes. And so that was also my only summer course. And I don't know if there's any like merit to that too, but I'm like such a summer person, and it was so inspiring being able to examine storytelling via the lens of movies and TV and scripts, as opposed to this like long linear structure of a novel. I think that, I mean, there's so much out there. Like there's the Save the Cat writes a novel that is inspired by the Save the Cat screenplay beats. So there's already so much overlap, and actually, so some of it is like a little, I don't want to say outdated, but I think that like inciting incidents have moved up in the percentage points as compared to where they were when those books came out. It just really gave me the opportunity to think about character on character, dialogue, and story shape in a way that I hadn't really considered before. So when I was outlining my debut, I didn't even use the writes a novel beats. I only used screenwriting storytelling.
Do you still use a version of that when you're doing your 20,000 word outlines? Have you kind of developed your own sort of beats that you know you need to hit? How is that?
Funny enough, what I did was probably foolish, but I took a bunch of different storytelling shapes and like made an amalgamation out of all of them. And I have an Excel sheet that has like the order of which everything should go. And it's like kind of Venn diagrammy as well. So you see like this person's theory goes for this length of time, this person's theory goes for this length of time, and what should be happening. And yeah, so like even still, I do a lot of reverse outlining for things that I find successful in media. And like The Pit, for example, I love The Pit so much. And part of the genius of that is their 1 hour episodes that align with the 1 hour of their shift. So I do a lot of reverse outlining for anything that I can find that like motivates me or inspires me.
So not just about TV shows.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Like maybe even more so than books.
Yes, I think so. Because I mean, books, if there is a, what I call a mentor text, I'll rip that apart for sure. But for me, I think like looking at TV and getting inspired in that way is a lot more invigorating, because it's like not my personal medium maybe. And I love talking about like pilot episodes of TV. I love my husband. I'm always like, Kev, will you pause it? And then he'll pause it, and then I'll be like, oh, this is not going to end well. And he's always like, you're ruining it. But like knowing how like the EKG of the show is going to go is always like, so I don't know. I love when I'm proven wrong though. It's my favorite. I love when something surprises me.
How often does that happen?
Not often enough, unfortunately. But it's great when it does.
What is it about pilots that you're obsessed with?
Oh, if you can set up a successful pilot, especially if there is a really cool twist at the end of it. Like a great one actually that my kids were recently introduced to is Modern Family. I'm not going to spoil that at this point. Hopefully it's in the culture, but at the very beginning, you're following these different families, and at the end, they all kind of come together and you figure out like how they're all related. And it's like just a teeny bit of a jump to be like, oh, like that's that person's daughter, that kind of thing. But it's like when something happens that you don't know what that you're supposed to be looking for. I love when that happens.
You've now inspired me to go and watch the pilot of Modern Family, because as much Modern Family as I have watched, I don't know if I've ever seen the pilot.
Oh, strong recommend. You should. Yeah. My kids it was like really cool to watch them watch that. They're 11 and 8. So they're still young, but yeah.
My son's 11. So I'll get him to watch that one with me too.
Yeah, you get it.
Have you always been a writer?
Yes. I always say like, I didn't have the choice not to be. Way before I even really kind of realized it, I was like filling out journals, and I sent a handwritten story to Cosmo when I was in like 5th grade. So yeah.
Interesting choice.
Yeah, questionable, but it didn't get published. Cosmo, I'm still waiting. Yeah.
Cosmo, if you're listening, back through your files.
Yes, exactly.
So then what was the road to publication like for you?
Well, as I was getting my MFA, I knew that I wanted to be an author, but I also had done enough research at that point to understand that if I got a book deal, it was not going to pay my mortgage for the rest of my life.
Mm.
So my MFA, the whole reason why I did that was so that I could teach in academia for a little while and have a steady paycheck to support my novel writing dreams. I don't regret doing that at all. I'm no longer in academia, but it was the right move. But so I sort of bided my time. And then unfortunately, toward the end of my MFA, my dad died. And trying to figure out like I was not yet engaged. So like trying to navigate my relationship. And then we did get engaged. We got married and we had the kids, and all while I was working full time and working part time as a dance teacher. So life was so busy, but I just knew eventually I would get there.
Mhm.
So I wrote this book when my daughter was about a year and a half old, and I met. I'm not sure how familiar you are with pitch wars from the Twitter era
Mhm.
of writing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Both of my writing partners, we met because we were alternates in pitch wars. We were not like selected for the final agents showcase and all this kind of
Mhm.
thing. So we sort of like spitefully connected and like really motivated one another. And by that point, my son had been born and he was a newborn. And within like a 6 month period, the three of us were agented. Our first book deal was in the pipeline. Everything started kind of rolling and happening once we connected. So it's been so great for us to, keep this going all this time. But mine was not like I tried for years and years to get something out there. It was like I knew I had to be deliberate with my time, and I still am very deliberate with my time. And finally, when I was ready to like lock and load and get it going, it started taking off.
What do you think it was about joining up with your writing partners that was like that catalyst that just got everything going for all of you?
We just have such trust. I mean, a cool thing is we're spread across the country, so we don't see each other all the time.
Mhm.
I'm the young one, and we've got kids in different age brackets. Mine are elementary right now. Allison's are in high school, and Laura's are in college and graduating. So, and like we're spread East Coast, West Coast, Midwest. I feel like we cover like a lot of different audiences and locations, and just being able to cheer one another on. They're like the only people I would never be jealous of. We trust each other so implicitly, and we can be very blunt with one another when something's not working. And we have our claws wrapped into one another's work so deeply that whenever one of us runs into a problem, I can just throw it into the DM and they already know what I'm talking about. I've actually never had a beta reader before. And I think that they are why.
Do you trade work? Like, how does it
Yes.
actually work?
Mm-hmm.
You're just sending work like once a week, every day?
No, it's like a live process at the beginning. So
Mhm.
we might do a voice check on the first chapter or two, but really we just kind of talk about one another's stories to the point where we know them so intimately. And then we get a full manuscript whenever somebody's ready with it. So
So great.
we're not on like a chapter trading.
Mhm.
I don't work that way.
You just talk it out.
We talk it out, and like we might send a paragraph and be like, something feels wrong about this, and then like
Mhm.
I might say, yes, you need to delete it because I'm so blunt, but tactfully, because I always want somebody to push me to be better at whatever creative endeavor that I'm doing. And as a dance teacher, I see this all the time. The kids who I am critiquing are the kids that I really want to push. I really want them to level up because you can see something in them. And that's what I get from them. I know they see it in me. I see it in them. We're always pushing one another. And I think that that helps create a better work environment.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned dance, and I wanted to ask you about that. Have you always been a dancer as well? And how do you think that informs your writing?
Yes. My personal lore is I became a dancer because I wanted a leotard, and that checks out for me. So that's still the case. I think that the number one thing is dance is art and dance is storytelling. So being able to choreograph a piece for my students and see them bring it to life, it's not at all dissimilar to writing a short story. And then a novel is just a longer short story in many regards. So storytelling at large is definitely hugely present in my life.
Also, the Darling Killers podcast, another thing that you've got going on with your wonderful writing partners. Can you talk about the podcast specifically and how you guys started that and what it's all about?
Yes. So, oh, it's so much fun. I'm so glad that we finally have started this. So we've been in conversation partners at a lot of events over the years with one another. And people typically come up to us after and they're like, that was such a different event than a lot of the usual ones because you guys have such a nice rapport because we can joke with one another or call out one another, disagree with one another respectfully. And for a long time, people have said to us, you guys should have a podcast. And we're always like, yeah, too busy. But then over the winter, I said to them, I was like, you know what, guys, why not? Like, let's give it a go. And it has been so fun. We meet pretty much once a week and sometimes we try to batch record, but we come up with either craft-based episode topics or we come up with just industry topics. Our season one finale is coming out on Wednesday, and that one was a listener Q&A. So basically, we just, for any emerging authors, for any existing writers, for anybody who's just in this industry, I think people have enjoyed like seeing our rapport and just it's been awesome, to be honest with you.
It's a really fun listen.
Thanks.
And one of the things that you guys talked about on a recent episode was this idea of idea versus the idea versus concept, book concept. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit here and what you guys decided?
Yes. So I think it's very connected to what I was saying about like my 20K outlines that I can't write something unless it's a full on concept. And I think especially one of my co-host, Allison, she used to say that like she would get this idea and then like start writing it and then be like, wait a second, this book has no plot. And that's so common because I think like people are inspired all the time by people watching or another show or a different book or an experience of their own. And maybe that is an idea. But in our episode, we talked a lot about how that idea has to kind of grow some legs. So it can't just be like, oh, I want to write a book about the letter L. It has to be like a book about the letter L and this conflict that it goes through. And this all of a sudden the alphabet forgot the letter L and now we need to go searching for it. So like, the idea has to grow roots, it has to grow legs, it has to be something that can scaffold an entire book. And I think a lot of people get so excited to write something once they think of it that they all of a sudden realize 20K into it that it's just an idea and it's not a concept yet. So that was a fun episode for us to record because Allison is always very good about like she has the most ideas, I think, and then I will arrive to the DM and be like, hey, everybody, I know what book I'm writing next. Here's the full concept. I have the fewest ideas, I think. And Laura is like our little happy medium.
But do you think you have the fewest ideas because you have already fleshed out the whole thing?
Probably. I'm very practical again with time. The experience of losing my dad the way that I did, it was to suicide. It was not a good time in anybody's life. And I think that experience has obviously changed me because how could it not? But it has made me so, so, so protective of my time. And this is what we have here on earth. And I'm very conscious of that. So I think when I get an idea that I know I'm not going to develop further, I just like send it back out into the wind. Like I'll even say like, oh, I had this book idea. I'm not going to write it. and I'll just like dump it into the DM. But
in case anybody else wants it.
Yeah, go for it.
What does your daily writing routine look like then?
That's really cute. You think I have one?
Well, you said not every day, but what does it look like?
I mean, school year is better because I do need silence to write. And my husband runs a home healthcare company now from home. So that has changed our lives as well because he's on calls all day. I don't have a daily writing routine. I think if I was going to pick an ideal day, it would be wake up, workout, sweat, shower, eat coffee, sit down, write for a few hours, and then go about my day. I don't typically write for longer than 4 hours. That would definitely be like a long writing day for me. Mostly, I would say more like two, just with everything else I have going on. I do terrible writing at night. I am not a good night writer. And being on deadlines has really challenged that because sometimes I'm typing away while I'm sitting outside of soccer practice now. But yeah, I definitely don't have a good writing routine that I stick to because I think I need to be in a very specific mental state to actually sit down and do good writing. I try not to force it, even though having that crappy first draft is ideal. But
how do you think it's the deadlines then, the publishing deadlines that keep you going and writing even when the situation is not ideal?
yes, in a way, because deadlines are deadlines and I need to meet them. I've never not met one. But I'm very motivated. So I'm when I have a whole concept of an idea and it's all fleshed out and somebody is, prodding my brain to get their story out there, I'm going to write it. It's just a matter of making sure I do it on my terms and in the right way. And that I think probably has come with some growth as well. But yeah, I am not a good like sit down, set a timer, do my method. Once in a while, I do the Pomodoro method. Are you familiar with that one? Yeah. So once in a while, I'll do that if I'm on deadline and it can be helpful. But I find that I need to like really be in a specific state of mind to get good words down on a page.
And in case anybody listening isn't familiar with Pomodoro, it's when you set a timer.
Yes. And people pick different ones. I think, I feel like it's 40 or 45. No, maybe it's 20. I forget already. See, I'm not good at this, but let's call it 20 minutes on, 5 minutes off or something like that. And that can be helpful when I'm on deadline for sure. I definitely use that. And I get more words down when I do use that method. I think I was doing like 30-minute blocks and then 5 minutes off to like basically get a snack and then return.
A little reward.
And I know I think 2 hours is a full technical block. So yeah.
What do you know now that you wish you had known before you published your first book?
Oh my gosh, you'd have to do part 2 of a podcast probably, but so much is out of your control. So my debut actually had 5 editors, which is I know you just blinked. Yeah. That's a lot, right? Because staff turnover and unfortunately the original imprint closed. And then actually similar thing with Your Soulmail is attached. The original imprint folded into Mira. So there has been like upheaval that is out of my control. And there's literally nothing that I could do to make an editor not move to a different house or, like everybody you have to respect that. It's people's lives and jobs. And, I also have a pretty good eye for business, I would say, just being, the wife to my husband, who's a business owner. So I also understand publishing strategy and strategic decisions and why imprints do evolve or shift. But the tone of the imprints in both cases were a little bit different, and adjusting my expectations was important for me. So like, I think I wish I could go back in time and just tell myself like, you're going to have to roll with stuff you are not going to be expected, prepared, everything, and just kind of go with it, because what are your alternatives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your favorite piece of advice for aspiring authors?
This one is so boring, but it's so true. It's just keep reading. And I know you've heard that so many times, but whatever you are trying to write, you need to read 30 books in your genre and do the reverse outlines and annotate your copies and think about why you are turning the pages and watch what's happening at the end of chapters. Watch where the twists come in the book. Check your percentage points. Check, I think once you can harness the elements, the storytelling elements like that, you're in a much better position. And I think more important than ever is reading more contemporary books. I feel like contemporary used to mean like published within the last 10 years. And then now it almost feels like published within the last 18 months. I feel like literature is changing so fast because our attention spans are so bad. And that has shifted the way that things are published.
Wow, that's great advice. And the last 18 months is the new.
I really think so. I mean, if I was going to give an emerging author querying advice, I would say to make sure your comp titles are not 3 to 5 years anymore, but 1 to 2.
Wow.
Wow. Even more impressive would be like an upcoming book. Although I guess it would be harder to get sales figures for that for the comp purposes. But yeah, I just think if you examine even like an author who has been publishing for a decade or more, if you read their most current work and then their work 10 years ago, it's not necessarily their evolution as an author that is going to be the biggest driver. It's going to be the audience. Like all of our brains are different now.
What specific, is there like a type of specific change that you've
Books are shorter. That is also because of the cost of printing, but books are generally shorter. So I know a lot of querying authors are typically told like keep your book below 100K. I go shorter now. I hate to say it, but I would go shorter now as a debut. I know like so many people. So the inciting incident, again, you'd have to fact check me on this, but it used to pretty much come between 8 to 10% of a novel. So if you're writing 100K, that would be like 8 to 10K into it. It's often on the first page now. And that is not something that we would have seen 5 years ago, even. It was more rare. And it's not always like sometimes, typically I would say you want the ability to start rooting for your characters before they get to that big inciting incident. And so what a lot of authors have done now is double up an inciting incident. So they do one early and then they do another one at the standard place where you've already started to care about your characters too. So that is another big change that I have personally noticed in my industry evaluations.
Oh, that is interesting. Because now that you mention it, I'm like, oh yeah, that is happening. Interesting. I've never really sat down and thought about it in that way. So smart. You were giving us such good stuff, Joan. Thank you.
Good. I hope it's helpful.
It's wonderfully helpful. We have a traditional last question on this podcast, and it is, when your Soulmail is turned into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
I'm the worst at music, so I want to put that out there. And I'm saying that as a dance teacher, I have the most embarrassing Spotify Wrapped of any person I've ever met, always. I'm very bad with song titles. This is one of my character flaws. That being said, I do have an answer for you. And that would be the song Happy Together by the Turtles. Would be, I think, like a very strong opener if Soulmail was ever going to be like a miniseries or a movie.
When it is a miniseries or
yes, there you go.
Joan F. Smith, thank you so much for coming on today. It has been so wonderful getting the chance to talk with you.
Kelly, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.